Mr. Chairman, so the United States has put a number of rules in place to ensure that we don't inadvertently contribute to civilian casualties. But rules on the books are not enough. I want to make sure that these rules work and that our military leadership is putting the protection of civilians at the forefront. Defense Secretary Austin has said preventing civilian harm is, quote, a moral and strategic imperative. And during your confirmation hearing, General Kurilla, you agreed and you said you would work to improve those processes. And the DoD has taken an important step in that direction when it issued the Civilian Harm Mitigation and Response Instruction last December to provide guidance on how the department should prevent and respond to civilian harm. And I want to thank you for that. Among other things, the guidance directs the department to identify whether the partners and allies we provide weapons to will mitigate civilian harm. Now, General Kurilla, can we get an accurate picture of whether U.S. arms transfers contribute to civilian harm if we don't collect information about how these weapons are actually used?
Yeah, so Senator, I am not involved in the advising of the ground operations.
I understand that. I understand, but do you need information about how the weapons are used to figure out if the rules are effective?
To be able to answer that last question, we would.
Yes, all right. It would seem to me to be crucial, but the Government Accountability Office identified significant gaps in our oversight about how the weapons are used, particularly in Yemen. And in response, the Department of State established a civilian harm incidents response guidance to investigate, and it created an internal database to track reports of partner governments suspected of using U.S. weapons against civilians. And yet, the Department of Defense has not created a similar process or committed to work with the State Department on its efforts to get the information needed for civilian harm. So, General Kurilla, why is that? Why wouldn't DoD want the information on whether our partners are using U.S. weapons against civilian populations?
I can't speak for why the Department of Defense does not have that, Senator.
But I take it you'd like to see it?
I think anytime we can do anything to do civilian harm mitigation. So once, as you mentioned, we stood up our own civilian harm mitigation response team. We have hired 9 of the 10 individuals
and I'm grateful for that. I'm just asking about getting the data. No. More data helps us make better decisions.
Better data always does. I will tell you it will be a difficult data to get, though.
Okay, I understand that, but State Department is committed to that. I'd like to see DoD committed as well. Now, another tool that we have for preventing civilian harm is Leahy laws, which require DoD and state to vet foreign forces for any gross violations of human rights before providing U.S.-funded assistance. This vetting process is a cornerstone of our human rights policy and is supposed to ensure that we don't contribute to human rights abuses abroad. However, DoD seems to find ways around it, and I just want to take one example. General Langley, should the U.S. provide assistance to a military that is notorious for targeting civilians or that recently overthrew its democratically elected government?
Senator, no.
No, good. I like that answer. That's exactly right. And yet, the U.S. military's exercises last year and planned exercises for this year included Mali and Sudan, where that has occurred. DoD claimed that under the Leahy law, it does not need to vet foreign forces for human rights abuses when it engages in activities such as joint military exercises, because DoD does not technically categorize that help as assistance. Now, when Senator Cardin and I found out about this practice, we sent a letter to DoD raising our concerns, and I'm glad that DoD stopped its exercise plans in Mali and Sudan. But we need to proactively close this gap and protect civilians going forward. The protections that we have for civilians, both in the statute and in guidance, can't just be pieces of paper. They need to have a real impact. We need to strengthen our tools for preventing civilian harm, and I look forward to working with the committee and with you to do that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.